Last time on the Ghostbusters retrospective.
And it would market itself like a sort of Force Awakens-esque reboot that would feature a lot of the classic iconography in a film that would have to involve Egon in a bigger fashion due to the passing of Harold Ramis. And if I am right this weekend, then I will call myself the Nostradamus of film reboots. Well, it's been a few months, and I am finally back to finish what I started with this Ghostbusters retrospective. Possibly for good. Maybe. Last time we talked about the franchise, I talked about everything from the original movie to up to the video game and the early, and also Ghostbusters Answer the Call. I talked about the reboot that happened in 2016, and now we are back with Ghostbusters Afterlife. So let's talk about it.
Call it fate. Call it luck.
Ghostbusters took a break between Answer the Call and Afterlife. While the box office performance was decent for Answer the Call, it wasn't what Sony was really looking for. It wouldn't be a while before we would get any glimpse of what the future of this franchise would be. On January 15th of 2019, Ghostbusters Afterlife was announced to the world with Jason Reitman, son of the original film's director Ivan Reitman, set to direct and write the film. Not only that, but Ivan would also serve as the film's producer. At the time, Jason's biggest claim to fame at the time were comedy dramas like Juno, which, yeah, he did a pretty decent job, but you could tell there's a different sensibility of how he likes to portray comedy. He was also known for films like Up in the Air with George Clooney, Thank You for Smoking, and Tully. For some people, this definitely came as a surprise. Again, on the one hand, the idea of Jason taking on the role of directing a new Ghostbusters movie seemed kind of odd given his filmography, but then on the other hand, his actual ties to the franchise are pretty interesting considering the fact that he saw his dad direct these films and he was also involved in the original films themselves. So it gave a little bit more of a credence to, him directing the film.
I consider myself the first Ghostbusters fan. I was 7 years old on set, and before anyone knew what a Pterodog was or what a proton pack was, I was actually on set. I remember being on set the day that the Marshmallow Man exploded and melted, and they had a stuntman there getting, pelted with shaving cream.
Of course, some fans of Answer the Call found that Sony was conceding to toxic fans who hated the 2016 film, and it really didn't help much when the director, Jason Reitman, said it would be for all the fans like him, which can be interpreted as, male fans who wanted the original, characters back and all that stuff, but that's a whole other thing. With statements like that, you'd think that he was a hater of Answer the Call and that he was a misogynist, but he actually clarified it in a statement on Twitter by saying this: "Whoa, that came out wrong. I have nothing but admiration for Paul and Leslie and Kate and Melissa and Kirsten and the bravery with which they made Ghostbusters 2016. They expanded the universe and made an amazing movie." Paul Feig would actually also later corroborate this statement by saying this on Twitter as well. "Jason was a supporter of mine at the time when I couldn't get movies made. He has always been a true gentleman to me and a supporter of Ghostbusters Answer the Call. I can't wait to see his take on the Ghostbusters universe. Big love and respect to you, Jason. Your fan, Paul." Now, while Jason was going to ignore Answer the Call in terms of continuity, that isn't to say that Answer the Call is not necessarily canon. See, if we're going to go by the logic of my previous retrospectives where I said that certain comics can be canon, then comic books like this one, the Ghostbusters 101 Everyone Answers the Call edition, is canon. In this book, specifically, this is a book where there is a sort of time-traveling, dimension-hopping ghost that the team from the 1984 crew end up crossing over with the crew from Answer the Call and try to take down the ghost that kind of brought them together. It's actually a pretty awesome and funny story at times, and I've had my time with it, and it's not too bad, honestly. And it's canon. I would argue, at least. Now that tangent is out of the way, where were we exactly? Oh yeah, developing Ghostbusters Afterlife. Jason had finished the script and sent it around to the cast and crew. The script from the beginning was about family.
"I don't have friends. I got family."
No, Dom, we're not talking about Fast and the Furious today. Dan Aykroyd even went as far as to call it a beautiful script. The film not only was a legacy sequel, but it also garnered the approval of pretty much all the original Ghostbusters, especially from Bill Murray, who, given his past, had no interest in sequels. except this one, stating, "The script is good. It's got lots of emotion in it. It's got lots of family in it, with through lines that are really interesting." But one of the most important approvals came from Violet Ramis, Harold Ramis' daughter. This one is the most important for obvious reasons that we'll get into later in this video, but keep this in mind when we get to that section about a certain guest appearance. One of the many things that I liked about this film was its attention to production and creature design. In the behind the scenes for the film, Jason brought back the people responsible for creating many of the iconic settings, creatures, props, and effects for the original films. Apparently, at one point, they lifted the pink energy stuff from the first Ghostbusters and reused them in this film, which is actually pretty cool.
Kinds of techniques that were developed back in '84. Spirits start to kind of emanate from this mountain, and if it looks familiar, it's perhaps because it was designed based on that shot over Manhattan in which spirits descend on the city. And our plan is to scan old opticals and scan shots from the original film and actually use some of the original opticals in our film.
Hell, even the Gozer dogs are mostly practical. Plus, it isn't just the original films that they're working with, as the film even has a ghost that came from the real Ghostbusters animated series. Now that is what I call a fun Easter egg. After all the pre-production was settled, the film went into production under the title Rust City on July 12, 2019 in Alberta, Canada, and wrapped production after 68 days on October 18, 2019. Now I don't really have to tell you why the film was delayed in terms of its release, but it was delayed multiple times because of the 2020 COVID pandemic that raged for plenty of years, and it's still happening at this point. But the film was eventually released at New York City Comic-Con. Yeah, one of the first showings of the film wasn't in theaters, but to unsuspecting Ghostbusters fans that were at a Comic-Con in New York in August of 2021. Eventually, the rest of the world would be able to see the film in November. And with that, we have come to the next section of the video. What is Afterlife?
One day, I was at Jason's house, and he said, "I've been thinking about Ghostbusters." I think my eyes lit up at the suggestion, because I knew what it meant, not just that he was saying it to me, but what it meant in terms of his own willingness to finally confront this legacy. I think we both approached it with great reverence and respect. We didn't rush into anything. You have to tread very carefully. I think you have to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons.
For Jason, it's a really important project because his dad, Ivan, did the original too, and he created this world, and so I think there's a lot of pressure to sort of honor that.
Afterlife follows Phoebe, played by McKenna Grace, as her family moves from New York to a small Midwestern town called Somersville after their grandfather passed away. Phoebe also has a brother, Trevor, played by Finn Wolfhard, and soon both cross paths with their legacy that has been hidden from them by their mother, played by Carrie Coon. The film, for the most part, is split into different sections that culminate into a big third act. For Phoebe, she is slowly exposed to who her grandfather was. Her summer school teacher, Mr. Gruberson, played by the immortal-looking Paul Rudd, introduces her to the events of the first movie via YouTube. And when she is back home, her grandfather's ghost shows her his lab with the proton pack, and she fixes that up. Meanwhile, Trevor got a summer job and ended up finding the Ecto-1, which is now a barn car, dirty and rusted. He eventually fixes up the car with a little help from Egon. The larger mystery at play here for the cast is how Egon died and how that ties into the rest of the series. We find that the mine in Somersville was used to get material for Dana's apartment building in the first film. The mine was also used for a J. Jonah Jameson cameo.
We can rule the world.
After the kids' first ghost bust, they are arrested, partially because Trevor doesn't have a license, and partially because Phoebe damaged the town with a proton pack. To which we get our legally required phone call and our explanation of what transpired between parts 2 and Afterlife.
Raise a cult and we're closed.
Wait!
According to Ray, business dried up for the crew and they went their separate ways. Peter became a professor, Ray went back to the occult bookshop, and Winston had the biggest win as he created a multinational corporation, who also had been paying Ray's bookstore bills.
You still covering the rent at Ray's bookshop?
Ray's gonna turn a profit one of these days.
Eventually they had to sell the firehouse because of the 2008 financial crisis, and Egon lost his mind, saying the world was going to end soon and they needed to do something, leading to Egon taking everything and running away. Eventually, the efforts to thwart away Gozer's forces proves too much as the Keymaster takes over Paul Rudd in a Walmart, and the Gatekeeper inhabits Phoebe's mom after getting into an argument with Phoebe about her covering up who her father really was. And so the third act follows the team, including Podcast and Lucky, trying to save not only Mr. Gruberson and Kaylee, but the world from Gozer's apocalypse. When all hope seems lost, the original team shows back up, save for one, that attempts to capture Gozer once and for all, but proves to be no match. But then Phoebe, alone, fires upon Gozer, and much like the graveyard fight in Goblet of Fire, the ghost of Phoebe's family shows up to help in the fight and eventually capture the god. And the film ends with Egon understanding his daughter's pain he put her through and going to the ghost realm, and the Ecto-1 returns to New York, where the Ecto Containment Unit is blinking, and it cuts to a jump scare of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Boys. As a whole, I really do appreciate that this film is a lot more structured than Ghostbusters Answer the Call. Answer the Call was a little bit too free-floaty, and this film, despite having some times where it felt like there was some improv, it was mostly well-structured and well-paced for the most part. The effects are well handled and the characters are great. Phoebe is the biggest draw as she is funny and inquisitive, similar to her grandfather. In fact, she also wears Egon's glasses that were used in the first film. Podcast, her new friend at school, is kinda just fine. He's a little fun companion, plus I love the reveal that Ray was his only subscriber.
Are you all right, son? You just single-handedly defeated a manifestation of Gozer.
You gotta be my podcast.
Sure, what's it called?
Mystical Tales of the Unknown Universe.
MTW, that's you.
Wait, you're my subscriber?
Really found its voice in the 46th episode.
Trevor. Finn is a great actor and apparently drew on his own love of cars for the role. The only character I don't think gets a ton of characterization is Lucky. We get only a little bit of her character, but we do know that she works at the diner. She's a little bit of a rowdy kind of person, but she is also the sheriff's daughter. That's about it for me. I will say, though, that the film isn't as funny as the original films, and that is okay. Where Answer the Call had irreverent humor similar to the original films, it also had the worst structure. Afterlife had a better structure, but not a lot of the irreverent humor. I mean, it still works, don't get me wrong here. But of course the thing everyone was having a debate on is whether or not Egon was handled well. So let's talk about the ghost in the room.
It's really particularly special for me to get to be a part of a tribute to Harold Ramis.
Harold is the heart of those characters, and that is what you feel when you watch the original Ghostbusters. When Gil and I sat down to write this movie, the person that we felt we needed to channel was Harold Ramis.
The Ghostbusters, as we know them, were four guys. There would be an absence that would be profound, and that absence was Harold. The weight of those who are no longer with us, you feel that on the screen. That's what the audience feels coming off of the screen in those moments, that there is a true human connection.
Harold unfortunately passed away in 2014, and the biggest struggle for any attempt for a third movie was to address Harold's absence. Answer the Call had a bust of his head in a university, and here he gets the Luke Skywalker Mandalorian treatment. There is a discussion to be had about resurrecting old actors or dead actors for the purposes of a film. In most cases, ethically, it's very much in poor taste, especially when it's handled poorly. As much as I loved Luke in the Book of Boba Fett, and the deepfake looks exquisitely like a young Mark Hamill, there was just something off about it. Plenty of people I've seen talk about Luke talked about how the voice did not really match up with the face, and that was mostly because the lines were being delivered through an AI artificial intelligence that just sounded robotic. It didn't really have the actual cadence of an actual human performance, and that's where a lot of people really lost it from the Book of Boba Fett. And again, plenty of people I've seen talk about Luke in this show is that they felt that he wasn't a character, but an action figure to position and do whatever the directors want instead of an actor interpreting the script and giving their performances. Digital performances require references and performers. I don't think Golan would be nearly as good without Andy Serkis behind the motion tracking dots. Stuff like that pales in comparison to things like Tarkin and Rogue One, where the person behind the CG did an impersonation of Peter Cushing to add to the performance. it's a full performance behind a CG character. So what of Harold Ramis's appearance in Ghostbusters Afterlife? Well, remember what I said in the pre-production of this film?
So the first person who ever read the script for Ghostbusters Afterlife was my father.
Yeah.
The second person was Erica Ramis, the widow of Harold Ramis. And beyond that, her sons, her daughter, Violet Ramis, who I literally grew up with on the set of the original Ghostbusters. And they've been a part of the process from the beginning. Violet came with me the first time we pulled Harold's original proton pack out of storage, and she put on her father's proton pack. They were one of the first people to see the actual finished cut. They looked at visual effects as they were being made. They reviewed his Hasbro character. So they've been part of it.
The VFX house that did the recreation of Rachel in Blade Runner 2049 came on board, and they studied Harold in the original Ghostbusters film and made a complete CG character of Harold and made it indistinguishable from the real thing in the film.
We don't have any live cast of Harold, we don't have any body scan, so we're starting from footage from the original film. We were so lucky to have the original negative available, and we actually scanned the film at high resolution to capture, in essence, who Harold was. When we have the look of Harold in 1984, we're going to start an aging process to take it to the look that he could have had when he was in his 70s, to be the same age of the other original Ghostbusters.
What I said about needing a real performer behind the scenes is still true in this film, as Bob Gunton studied Egon's movements and mannerisms to mimic Egon's physical performance. He also had dots on his face to track the digital Egon face, and I gotta say, they did an excellent job. But there is one thing I didn't know when researching this film and looking behind the scenes of this one. The person doing the stand-in for Egon in this particular shot, that wasn't Bob. That was Ivan Reitman.
My father put on the Egon Spengler suit and acted in for that scene. And there's a couple shots in the movie that are of my father wearing Harold's old suit. And that was the most emotional moment for me.
Now knowing that, and how meta the film became with the film's themes of legacy, Jason getting to work with his dad as a passing of the torch gesture, hits a little harder knowing that was one of the last things Jason got to do with his dad before his passing earlier this year. So now both Harold and Ivan are immortalized in the film. But what I don't understand here is that they clearly had makeup for Bob to wear in the beginning of the film with him in the shadows. So why didn't they do that in the third act? Halloween Kills had an actor that looked like Donald Pleasence to create the 1978 prologue in the film with some added makeup, so why didn't they do the same thing here? I'm guessing it's because of what Jason said about Egon potentially having a line in the film. However, even when this is done in good taste, when the production consulted and involved the family of the person being recreated, that doesn't necessarily mean that it still doesn't have some cynical nature to it. Keep in mind, I do enjoy his inclusion here, but you have to admit here that his inclusion is very cynical to pull on the strings of fans the same way Luke is being used today. They are being used as tools instead of characters. I would say that the studio used Egon as a toy, but their merchandise department beat me to it. To be clear, I do think Egon being used sparingly here is a good decision on the part of Jason and the production, but I do think we need to be more critical of studios resurrecting actors from beyond the grave. Ethically speaking, it is pretty cynical and in poor taste in many ways. It is a way to make money, but it definitely disregards the dead in a way that makes it feel like they are using them as puppets. And I think the reason why we are in the position is due to Solo: A Star Wars Story. I feel like Lucasfilm decided to double down on deepfakes and CG. That film had an actor actually perform as his own interpretation of Han Solo, but I guess they find it easier to utilize these characters like action figures. There is more to a performance than just playing the character. There are nuances that deepfakes so far just really can't replicate. However, I will say that the use of deepfake CG recreation is a tool, in the same vein as CG or special effects. It's neither good or bad, it's how you use it, and I think in this situation, it works, despite its more cynical nature. Ghostbusters Afterlife ended up earning $400 million on a $75 million budget, so clearly the film was good enough to probably warrant a sequel in the future. The film as a whole is a fun time for me. even if it isn't all together. It definitely is better than Answer the Call in a few respects, and it had a story that had some heart put into it. As of now, the future of the Ghostbusters franchise doesn't have a lot really going for it, aside from a brand new video game that was just teased. Maybe we'll get a sequel to Afterlife, or Answer the Call, or even make a new animated series. That would be cool. And that is the end of this ghost hunt. I hope you guys had a good time watching my 2 retrospective videos, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Peace.